Right, good evening and welcome to Axiom Flux Season 2, Episode 13. I'm Stav, and tonight we've got with us Bok as well, and we're going to have a little chat about the weather, past, present and future. Evening, Bok.
Evening, Andy.
Jolly good. How's the weather over there?
It's actually quite mild. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're having quite a mild winter, aren't you?
It's looking that way. We're in mid-January here, and we haven't really had any below freezing temperatures. Not normal anyway.
It's a bit freaky, isn't it? It's a little bit freaky for Canada not to have any sub-zero temperatures at all, really. I think you've had just the odd evening or the odd day. No prolonged weeks of sub-zero temperatures like even where you are, that part of Canada. You normally get 1 or 2 weeks where it's pretty cold, isn't it?
Yeah, normally January and February here are below freezing, that's for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, so do you want to start us off tonight, Bok?
Yeah, sure. Share my screen here.
Okay.
You got it now?
Yeah, it's cool.
Okay. So that was the next chart, and that's the precipitation chart, Andy.
Right, yeah.
And right below there. There's another chart.
So that's an interesting one because...
Well, that whole region of Canada and USA are relatively mild.
Yeah.
And the southern parts of USA are cooler.
Yeah, that's what I was
cooler than normal, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was finding interesting on that map, actually.
Oh, here's the precipitation map.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't want to spend too much time here, but that was their forecast that I wanted to share. And yeah, and this, can you see that, Andy?
Yep.
Yeah, this is from a bad ice storm we had here in 1998.
Right.
You can see on the bottom there, it took down the electrical power towers. Power lines were off.
Yep. I remember that book, actually. Yeah. I remember reading about that, yeah.
Yeah, it says for 6 days in January 1998, freezing rain coated Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick with 7 to 11 centimeters, 3 to 4 inches of ice. Trees and hydro wires fell, and utility poles and transmission towers came down, causing massive power outages, some for as long as a month. It was the most expensive natural disaster in Canada.
On me.
That was it from this page. And then, so that was 1998. This is from a known magazine over here, Andy, called Maclean's. And they published an article, March 13th, 2014, The Winter That Ruined Everything. It broke records, kneecapped the economy, and showed us how ill-prepared Canada is for the future of extreme weather. Yeah. In Winnipeg, frigid temperatures and heaping snowbanks are all part of the local charm when your city's nickname is Winterpeg, a label so famous it appears in the Canadian Oxford Dictionary. A little further down here. But this record-breaking Canadian winter has been so nasty, so unrelenting, that even the peg is losing its patience. Manitoba's capital marked its coldest December to February stretch in 35 years, with a nagging mean temperature of -20 Celsius. It's been so ridiculously bitter that the ground is freezing at depths nobody can remember, more than 2 meters down. At last count, the unprecedented frost line has left nearly 1,000 addresses with frozen pipes and city officials scrambling to restore running water with the 4 machines they have that can thaw the lines. Some families haven't been able to use their taps or toilets for 2 weeks. If they want to freshen up, Mayor Sam Katz has kindly offered the shower facilities at city-run pools. This is like the exclamation point on a really rough season, says Ian McCausland, a commercial photographer whose North End studio lost its water supply more than a week ago. People are really on the edge. And over in Toronto, where the mercury also nosedived to the lowest point in 2 decades, the city surpassed its record for consecutive days with at least 1 centimeter of snow on the ground. 89 as of March 7th and counting. No town, though, amassed more white stuff than Stephenville. NL, population 7,800. The winter isn't even over. I was just seeing if there's anything else here I wanted to share. Oh, and this was interesting, Eddie. Consider this pattern. In 2008, private insurance payouts linked to severe weather in Canada exceeded $1 billion for the first time. The annual tally has stayed above $1 billion every year since, and in 2013, the final figure was a whopping $3.2 billion. Yeah, there's normally a lot more car accidents and whatnot, so the insurance companies are busy.
Yeah.
In Toronto alone, the ice storm cost the public purse more than $100 million. Throw in Hamilton and the rest of GTA, and the liability climbs to $275 million. Point to any Canadian city these days, and it's hard to find one that won't be digging deeper into its pockets to pay for this brutal winter. Yeah, it was across the country. Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg. I think that was it from this article.
Okay.
And this one's from Wikipedia on El Nino. The cultural history and prehistoric information. And I saw this article down here, very interesting. El Nino affected pre-Columbian Incas and may have led to the demise of the Moche and other pre-Columbian Peruvian cultures. A recent study suggests a strong El Nino effect between 1789 and 1793 caused poor crop yields in Europe, which in turn helped touch off the French Revolution. Extreme weather produced by El Nino in 1876 gave rise to the most deadly famines of the 19th century. In 1876, famine alone in northern China killed up to 13 million people. And further down, in 1893, suggests droughts in India and Australia tended to occur at the same time. And I thought this was interesting, because we were talking about trees and stuff last week. And this person here says, we must plant the right trees. It says down here, the storm has taught us a thing or two about the trees, of which we were blissfully unaware until we found so many of their broken branches lying on our lawns, roads, and cars. Siberian elm trees in particular suffered serious damage. Many of them lost between 30% and 50% of their upper branches and will have to be taken down altogether. Older black locusts also suffered a significant degree. Certain and other black locusts were also damaged, but generally to a lesser extent. Manitoba maples, crack willows, white mulberries, white elms, silver maples in many parts of the city were badly damaged. We are told that most of those trees, however, will survive after undergoing suitable pruning. Leaside, which is a small area in Toronto, has a large number of older Norway maples. Many of these lost a lot of branches. My information is that our Norway maples are largely within about 20 years at the end of their natural lives in any event, as they were all planted within the same time period when most of the original homes were built. Which draws attention to an important lesson. It is to be remembered that there was less recognition then than now of the merits of A, planting a healthy variety of trees in any one community, and B, planting native species rather than exotics. It turns out there is a reason why native species get to be native species in the first place. They have adapted over time to cope with their challenges of the local climate, including, it would seem, the occasional ice storm. The number of healthy native trees that suffered damage across the city is relatively low. For the most part, oak, sugar, maple, walnut, and ash trees survived well. Most that did suffer damage are seen to have had defects in them. Even at that, many with visible defects survived. Conifers, for the most part, made out better than deciduous trees. Many bent over beneath the weight of the ice, but stood up straight again after the thaw. Northern species, such as white pines and spruces of all types, seem to have survived well. And that brings me up to my last article here. And this was about urban farmers and gardeners can reduce biodiversity loss. And I think that this is another way to help protect, in the case of bad weather, it'd be nice to have some hardier plants. If you're growing anything in your backyard, any herbs or food. I noticed myself, I have a sage plant here, which I'm estimating it's well over 10 years old, and it was in the garden when we took over this place, and it survived the ice storm and many of the other things that were in the yard. I noticed that the ones that were of a native variety, they definitely held up a lot better to the bad weather. Yeah, and that's it, Eddie.
Okay, that's quite cool. Bok, some interesting articles as usual. I don't know if was there something you mentioned. Was it the second article you? Can you bring up this? I got a couple of questions. Yeah, that's right. It says average winter summer. I think it's further down where it says something about that 1998 snow. Where was it? It's somewhere there about the being the worst. Was it 7 years? Oh, yeah. For 6 days in January 1998, freezing rain coated Ontario, Quebec, and Brunswick with 7 trees and hydro wires fell, and utility poles, towers came down, causing massive outages. Summer's most expensive natural disaster in Canada. And my point is that, you know, it only took 6 days of extreme weather to basically cause the biggest economic damage in Canada's history. Now, what would happen if Canada had 2 or 3 months of those conditions, Bob? Do you think? I mean, if 6 days caused that,
it would be it'd be a national emergency.
Would Canada cease to exist, would you think?
It would certainly be a state of emergency here.
Yeah, that's right. Well, just thinking along those lines, and it was, I found it interesting what you were saying about the trees and the indigenous trees and the native trees surviving better throughout the severe winters and the colds and everything like that. Well, there's, like you say in the article, there's a reason for that, because they were there for a reason. They were that species because they could survive the harsh winters and that. It brings me to a point of thought, actually, of when did the first of the European settlers arrive in Canada? Roughly off the top of your head, can you remember, Bok? Or not that you was there, but I mean, what's the historical? Sorry, what's the historical records? Is it around late 1600s, early 1700s?
Yeah.
So
I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, so basically it would have been during the period which there was this mini ice age.
Yeah, it was just after you guys went through a really bad period, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was that period of the Monde minimum, which was between 1600 and 1700, really. So I'm just thinking that Canada
and it was a world wide famine in some areas.
That's right. So basically, they would have, the first settlers would have arrived during that period, and whether it would have been recorded. Can you remember? I mean, it was mostly beaver pelts, wasn't it? Was it stuff and that they, because you got that large company up Hudson Bay. What was it called?
Yeah, Hudson's Bay Fur Trading Company.
Yeah. Now, was there any other large companies to do with anything else in Canada at that time, or is that the all be all and end all? Was it mostly just fur trading?
Yeah, that was pretty much the first company.
So really, you've got to think about, well, that was probably the only trade that could be done in Canada at that time.
Yeah,
because of the climate. Because whenever I hear the wild frontiers of Canada and the mountain men and all the films and that, it's always about these guys in buffalo, whatever, fur smothered in, and they freezing to death, and it was always kind of that. So I'm thinking that, what happened?
It was definitely it was very rugged. It was a very tough life, Eddie.
Yeah, so if Canada has to go through that again, I don't think the actual, like the UK and like a lot of sort of North America, really, including the USA, I don't think the today's infrastructure would survive.
Yeah, I
It
tell
would,
you, well, around me, the last ice storm we had here, I think it was around 2014, 13. I noticed a lot of the younger trees that had been planted, in typical kind of silly fashion uh, along the curb. They and plus they're raised in nurseries and stuff, so they kind of have a disadvantage to begin with, and then they're just plotted out out in the side of the curb, and all those little trees, I'd say the majority of them didn't make it.
no, no, that's because they're not up to it. Basically, they're not the excuse me, they're not really the indigenous trees, are they? They're not. Um, Again, it's the whole the whole of the Western world, especially in the northern hemisphere, which is most of North America, Canada, and the northern states of America, and also across northern Europe. I think the infrastructure from the industrial revolution up to this point now has all been with a slightly warming planet or whatever. Because I mean, I do believe in global, not global, um, uh, weather's always changing. It's always changing. I mean, every day there's no 2 days the same, as they say. So you know, the whole idea that this current warming spell is going to go on and on and on and on is ridiculous under
Yeah.
the CO2 guys. Anyway, that's what I feel. Climate
Well,
change.
that's what actually would would be the most worrisome thing of the global, not the global warming, sorry about that, but the mild winter effect that we're having is mild winter is scary because you have a greater chance of things like ice storm happening,
Yeah,
and that's probably the worst case scenario is our ice storms.
yeah, yeah.
It's better to be minus 12 or minus 14 or whatever, because at least you're not going to get hit by an ice storm.
No, no. That
Um,
this is
so that's
this.
what worries me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's well, let's go to let's if I can bring up some. Am I working? I think I've got to bring this up. I better doubly make sure. Well, with that, we'll move on to a couple of articles um, that I'm going to cover because we sort of, although we haven't sort of covered today's climate. Well, look out the window. That's what I say to people. You covered pretty much the past and the climates and some events there, Bok. So I think perhaps we'll go straight into what the future is or what the future could be. And I'm very much along the lines of I don't buy the anthropogenic global warming. Um, Climate change, of course, it always changes. But I think my thoughts are that this winter will be the mildest winter that this next generation will ever see again, as far as I'm concerned. It's a bit of a false dawn, and this is what always happens in everything. I found in my 50 odd years, 5 score and 5 whatever years I've been on Earth, is that just when you think, right, when things are going to be one way, they've got this nasty habit of completely changing in a very short time.
Yeah.
Sort of like. So I think this is false pretenses. I think the weather just always plays tricks, and it can go from a really warm winter, and within a year, the next winter can be absolutely freezing or whatever. And I think this is we're on the terms of we're on the we're on the edge of this climate change period. And this I've got an article here, American Thinker. It's about the climate is indeed changing, cooling ahead. And I've covered before on 2 or 3 articles on Axiom about this and gone into it in a bit more in-depth detail. But tonight we'll just skim over with another scientist, an Australian one, who's actually bucking the AGW trend and what the the globalist elite are pushing, etc. I'll read you this article. The climate is indeed changing, cooling ahead. Global warming became climate change in response to the inconvenient truth that there has been no warming over the past 17 years. Could click on that, but we'll leave that for tonight. This is called a pause, with the expectation and anticipation that any day now temperatures will begin to climb again. And when temperatures do rise, it could be called a pause in global cooling, or in other words, another turn in the endless cycle of the Earth warming and cooling. Pope Francis and President Obama continue to preach the perils of global warming, not concerning themselves with any pause or faulty climate models. One of the world's leading climate change experts disagrees about those perils, noting some mathematical anomalies which effectively disprove global warming. Dr. David Evans was a climate modeller for the Australian government. He has 6 degrees in applied mathematics in analysing complex and mathematical assumptions widely used to predict climate change. He predicts stable temperatures until 2017, after which the Earth will cool for the next decade, ushering in a mini ice age by 2030. Dr. Evans is a true academic. There's a compare and contrast. We won't go to that, but with our very own climate expert, former Vice President Al Gore at Harvard. Mr. Gore earned a D in a natural science course named Man's Place in Nature. He improved by his senior year, earning a C+ in another natural science class. Moving on to Vanderbilt Divinity School, Gore flunked 5 classes, including a course in theology and natural science. Yet Mr. Gore is viewed as a visionary, an oracle. The problem, according to Dr. Evans, lies in the validity of the climate models. He described 2 specific problems. First is a vastly overestimated impact on our temperature from CO2. Not that it doesn't have an effect, but that it is only 10 to 20% of what the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change predicts. The second is that the predictions have no reflections on changes that have actually been recorded. In other words, the consensus climate scientists are saying, to quote Groucho Marx, "Who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes?" Here's the carbon dioxide, or CO2, is the villainous greenhouse gas causing global warming, according to the EPA. CO2 emissions in the US increased by about 7% from 1990 to 2013, predominantly due to an expanding economy and population. Yet a closer look at the trend shows a drop in CO2 emissions after 2007, approaching 1990 levels. And don't forget that CO2 is plant food necessary for the trees and crops used to house and feed our growing population. There's the little chart there. It peaks up to 2007 and then starts to... This is their own charts, by the way. So, regardless of how CO2 fluctuates, Dr. Evans believes carbon dioxide causes only minor warming. The climate is largely driven by factors outside our control. So where is the media coverage? How about an open and honest debate about the cause of climate change, assuming we even know for certain? Instead, the media is ignoring the story as it doesn't fit the narrative of man-made global warming. No surprise. These findings here are unlikely to be popular with the establishment. The political obstacles are massive, notes Dr. Evans. Not only do the media and global warming zealots refuse to acknowledge conflicting science, but they also want to prosecute those who disagree. 20 climate scientists urged President Obama to prosecute global warming skeptics and deniers under racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations' RICO laws. A sitting US Senator Sheldon Whitehouse also suggests that RICO laws be applied to global warming skeptics. How's that for silencing your critics? Is Dr. Evans right about the mini ice age in 2030? Time will tell. What about some of the other global warming predictions involving temperatures, snow, hurricanes, and polar ice that have not come true? All we do know is that the Earth's climate is constantly changing, always has, and always will. Cooling causing ice ages, warming melts the ice. Thus far, the scientific establishment has not demonstrated any ability to predict the future climate or any means of controlling it. Instead of welcoming Dr. Evans' contrary view, the establishment ignores it, pretending it's not real or credible. This is bad science. Good science, on the other hand, requires that any hypothesis be tested against real-world observations with modification if the predictions don't match reality. Quoting Sergeant Schultz from Hogan's Heroes, "I see nothing, I know nothing," is the stuff of comedy, not science. So basically, that is, he's not alone, there's this guy, there's quite a few saying this same thing. And my thoughts is along the same lines of this guy. Now, I might go slightly off the beaten track here a little bit, and it is only a thought, and it's just a thought. Last week, I don't know if you saw this, Bok, but it's quite an interesting thing. Some scientists said, hey, there could be something else out there, when in actual fact two scientists says there is something else out there. And of course the local theories come out, the normal theories are Planet X, and they even write it up as Planet X on this science site. So anyway, just a quick brief little read of this. It's I'm going along the lines. I actually do think there is something out there, because they've been talking about this for the past year, actually, leaking little bits here and there. Even NASA, I've been floating the idea, sort of tongue in cheek, but saying, well, conspiracy theory and all the rest of this stuff. But I think it's a strong possibility, and it ties in with why I think things are about to change really drastically over the next year to 2 years in the way of weather, and this may be the reason why. And I'll read you a little bit of the article. It's astronomers say a Neptune-sized planet lurks beyond Pluto. The solar system appears to have a new ninth planet. Today, two scientists announced evidence that a body nearly the size of Neptune, but as yet unseen, orbits the Sun every 15,000 years. During the solar system's infancy 4.5 billion years ago, they say the giant planet was knocked out of the planet-forming region near the Sun. Slowed down by gas, the planet settled into a distant elliptical orbit where it still lurks today. The claim is the strongest yet in the centuries long search for Planet X beyond Neptune. The quest has been plagued by far-fetched claims and even outright quackery, but the new evidence comes from a pair of respected planetary scientists, Konstantin Batkin and Mike Brown of the Californian Institute of Technology, Caltech, in Pasadena, who prepared for the inevitable skepticism with detailed analysis of the orbits of the other distant objects and months of computer simulations. If you say we have evidence for Planet X, almost any astronomer will say this again. These guys are clearly crazy. I would too, Brown says. Why is this different? This is different because this time we're right. These guys are really confident. This is Mr. Brown and Captain, whatever his name is. Can't pronounce it. It goes on to say, I've actually lined this bit here for some reason. Outside scientists say their calculations stack up and express a mixture of caution and excitement about the result. I could not imagine a bigger deal if, and of course that's a bold-faced if it turns out to be right, says Gregory Laughlin, a planetary scientist at the University of California, Santa Cruz. What's thrilling about it is the planet is detectable. is detectable, you see. Batkin and Brown inferred its presence from the peculiar clustering of 6 previously known objects that orbit beyond Neptune. They said there's only a 0.007% chance, or about 1 in 15,000, that the clustering could be a coincidence. Instead, they say a planet with a mass of 10 Earths has shepherded the 6 objects into their strange elliptical orbits, tilted up the plane of the solar system. The orbit of the inferred planet is similarly tilted, as well as the stretched distance that will explode previous conceptions of the solar system. Its closest approach to the Sun is 7 times farther than Neptune, with 200 astronomical units, and an AU, astronomical, is the distance between the Earth and the Sun, that's 1 AU, about 150 million kilometers, and Planet X could roam as far out as 612,000 AU. Well beyond the Kuiper Belt, a region of the small icy worlds that begins at Neptune's edge at about 30 astronomical units. If Planet X is out there, Brown and Batkin say astronomers ought to find more objects in telltale orbits, shaped by the pull of the hidden giant, but Brown knows that no one will really believe in the discovery until Planet X itself appears within telescope viewfinder. I won't read the rest. So basically, what he's saying here is that they know it exists from the behaviour of the other planets, and the distant planets like Eris, and I'll show you a little diagram down here, like Sedna. Where's that? These other planets which they found just recently, 2013, 2012, Sedna. Eris should be here somewhere. Where is it? Anyway, so this orbit here is the suggested Planet X, or the thing that's 10 times bigger than Earth, or Neptune size. Again, it's only because of the behaviour of the orbits of these other planets that something else is affecting it, and it's not just our solar system. So again, this is just all theory, right? But I happen to sort of go. My thoughts are that there is something else. It may not be a rocky planet. It may not be a gas giant. It could actually even be a dwarf star. Could be something big anyway. But the reason why I pulled this up with the weather is that if you have a very large planet or brown dwarf or whatever it is that does come around here every 15,000 years, maybe less, maybe more, who knows? Again, it's all conjecture, but I've got a funny feeling it's already affected things. And if this planet does affect everything here, and the planets within our solar system here, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, Jupiter, and all the rest, the gravitational pull, if you believe in Newton, or electromagnetic, if you're an electric universe theory guy, will undoubtedly affect the Sun. And I think it will, and it will make this coming global cooling even more extreme to what these scientists that I've been following are predicting. So I think it's to do with definitely the solar cycles, definitely to do with warming and cooling. I don't buy the CO2 Bok, and I don't even think a lot of scientists deep down do. We know what that's all about. That's a globalist carbon tax agenda, new world order plan, etc., etc., etc. And it's a load of nonsense. And I think they're going to be caught with their pants down, or they know this is happening, and they're deliberately deceiving the public and leaving it off to the last minute until it causes all sorts of problems, which may be what they want. Who knows? But that's what I think. This is linked, definitely linked. I think, because they keep bringing this out, and this is if you've got a couple of scientists that are saying that there's time there, they are right. So this is here. This is different because this time we are right. They're quite respected scientists. They work for the system. So there we are. In fact, hopefully you followed that load of nonsense, Bok, but you see where I'm getting at, and I think I can't sort of go any more on this because this is if buts and maybes, but I think it's going to have a bearing.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is this the same Planet X that that Harrington fellow found? The guy who was the first guy to spot it, and then he disappeared.
It could be, yeah, yeah,
The guy who
yeah.
the fellow who worked for NASA.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think they've known it's been there for a very, very long time. Um, you know, um, I just got this. You follow these things, and these articles seem to keep just coming up, and if they could be, might be. Um, YouTube has been full of Planet X since YouTube has been out there, we know. But I think not on this one. There was another article last week or the week before covering this same thing, and there was one of the NASA scientists on the NASA channel saying, "Oh, if it is planet, if it is," that was his words. If it is. Now that says to me, yeah, it says if it is Planet X, that's them confirming there's definitely something there. When you say if it is Planet X, that's confirming that there is something there. I mean, how do they know it's going to be Planet X? Is it going to arrive with a great big letter X on it, or the words Nibiru written on the face of it? I mean, So, yeah, I mean, just.
So, I mean, is this thing big enough that maybe an amateur type person could spot this with his telescope, Andy?
Well, it depends on what it is. If it's like if you take it along the lines, I think it might be a brown dwarf. I've got this feeling there is a brown dwarf, or there's a binary. Our solar system is a binary solar system, but it's not like as in Alpha Centauri, where you've got the two brighter suns, or one that's very much a bit more bright than ours, and one that the other binary star to it is a little bit less and a bit smaller, and then they've got their own little brown dwarf that's quite small going around, apparently. So from what I've read, I think we do have a binary solar system, but we only have the one bright star, but the binary companion, if you can look at it like this, perhaps this isn't the scientific way of looking at it, and perhaps they say, well, they can't term it as a binary, but the actual binary star is a massive brown dwarf, and if it's a massive brown dwarf, you won't see it very well, because you'd have to, if it's a very cool brown dwarf, even with infrared telescopes, it's gonna have to be reasonably close before you see it. Pick it up. So
yeah.
What I'm saying here is that unless it's the, I mean, because they do. I mean, I think they only started detecting brown dwarfs in the galaxy in the last 7 years, 8 years. Before that, they didn't detect them. Now they're up to about 16,000 brown dwarfs in 6 or 7 years within our galaxy, because they're using the extra sensitive infrared telescopes. They haven't had the technology to spot these things, but now they're seeing these brown dwarfs all over the place,
right,
in other solar systems. So I mean, they can view them, but some are more easier to see with the infrared telescope, and some are not. But they can't do a proximity on size, because some of these brown dwarfs probably are so low density that the star is not so bright that it's trouble. They only pick up a very small part of it, perhaps. I don't know. But I've just got this thing. I think we have a binary system, but it's not a binary system as we know it, Jim. It's basically you have the binary companion of our solar system is a massive brown dwarf, and that's what I think. I wouldn't say Planet X is. We can look on that theory of things, but call it what you like. But I think that's what's out there, and I think it's on its way back. I don't know how far, whatever. This is all conjecture. This is something I did have a little bit of a dream about the other night. Whether that means anything or not doesn't, I suppose. And as it gets closer, it'll have more of a gravitational pull or electromagnetic effect. If, like I say, you're electric universe theory guy, it will mess with the solar system. How much? Who knows? I don't got a clue. But I think it will certainly do funny things to the solar cycles, and they're all predicting a very small next cycle off of this one that's half the size of the one before. This is the one we've just finished or going down the slope of. Solar cycle 24 has been the lowest in 100 years, and we're just coming off the peak of that and going down the other side. Now the next one, they're saying it's going to be tiny, if at all any. That's what they're predicting by the plasma flows and the polar. I think it's the poles of the sun on the to do with the I don't know whether it's call it flux or whatever, but it's very weak, and it was very. I think the polar shift of the sun only happened very lethargically, and I think that one pole shifted 6 months to a year slower than the other pole. So all these things signify they're working it out that the next solar cycle will be so small, if it won't be worth having it. And if at all any solar cycle, and this is going to be a 20, 30, 50, 60, 70 years, I don't know, period where there's very little or no sunspots at all, well, I think it's going to be a little bit more complicated than that. And I'm tying this in with this planet, whatever it is. I think brown dwarf or something else. I don't know. And I think it's all got something to do with it, Bok. So I don't know. Just putting it out there, and that's just my thoughts on it. I don't know if PJ's in here. Is he at all? Did PJ come in? Let me put that off now.
Yeah, it's interesting, Andy.
Yeah, I don't know if PJ was in here. I think he might have just been listening. Are you there, PJ? Anything you want to make a comment on? Nope. Okay, so there we have it. That's my bit about the future, maybe. And your articles were great, Bok. Very. And whatever happens, is the world going to be ready for it? Do the powers that be know what's happening, know what's coming? Are they leading people up the garden path to think that everything is warming? And that's not a problem, because warmer is better than colder. And then all of a sudden it's going to change very rapidly. And only those that are prepared or know that these things are coming will have any chance of getting through it, if you can get through it, whatever. There we are. So
and another disadvantage to the modern age, Andy, is everybody has gas and electric heating. And if the system goes down, nobody even has an old-fashioned fireplace or a wood stove or.
Well, this is it.
Even if you have a generator, I mean, how long's your? I hope you got a couple of months worth of diesel or something. But it's amazing how the old school technology will trump anything in a modern age in an emergency situation.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, Bok. This is the infrastructure. Power plants, electricity power plants will stop. There'll be no electricity. There'll be no national grid. There'll be no grid. So therefore, that'll be gone. Forget gas as well. The road systems in the UK, I don't know what they're like in Canada. I should imagine they're very much better. But in the UK, the roads are falling to pieces, Bok. They're full of holes. They're forever. The motorways are all jammed up. If there's one accident on the M25, you're talking about delays of 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours. People are stuck there. So I just think the whole system. I just think the whole system is not ready, and I can't help but think that's a deliberate ploy. I just feel it, like they've deliberately let this whole infrastructure become vulnerable. And if we do, I mean, if we had winters like when I was a kid, a very small child in the 60s, in the early 60s, there's no way this economy would work. It would stop. This economy would stop. Well, the working class economy, what's left of it, would stop. That's for sure. Whether the banking and the computers will still be able to do their wheeling and dealing and rest of their fraudulent nonsense, I don't know. That's a different thing altogether. But I know for sure that getting supplies and the utilities will stop. So I just hope people start looking. I mean, don't believe me; they're just my thoughts. I always say this, and rightly so. I mean, it could be a nutter, as some people say. Well, I don't mind if using your own mind instead of relying, should we say, or believing somebody else is a nutter, then I'm quite proud to be a nutter, and I ain't got a problem with that. So there we go. Okay, Bok, anything more to add tonight?
No, that's it, Andy. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for your company. It's been interesting as usual, Bok, and hopefully we'll do it again next Sunday. Until then, mate. Cheers.
Thanks, Andy.